listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Welcome back to another Tuesday and another edition of the Motherhood Experience podcast. I'm your host, Val, and I'm so excited to have you joining me today, where I meet with a new to me friend, Heather Triplett. Heather is a friend of Kailyn Conway's, who was a previous guest on the Motherhood Experience. Quick shout out to Kailyn. And Heather has an incredible story. I'm excited for you to hear how she came about becoming a mother and her motherhood journey since. We had a wonderful conversation. It was hard for me to try to decide where to cut it short because I could have talked to her for a very long time. It was a fantastic conversation. So without further ado, actually, that's a lie. I am going to ado further because if you would be so kind as to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, comment, all of the things. You know how it is for the algorithm and all of that. Then once you do that, it will be without further ado that we launch into Heather's episode right now. All right. Well, I am here with a new friend, Heather. Heather and I do not know each other, but Heather is a mutual friend of our previous guest, Kailyn Conway. It is nice to meet you, Heather.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to get into this and hear your story about motherhood. Why don't you go ahead and start by telling us the ages of your kids and the stage of motherhood you're in?
Yeah, so I have 7 boys and only boys. And we go all the way from an 18-year-old who's getting ready to go off to college down to twins who are 16 months. So we've got an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, one who will be 14 in the summer. And those are my sons from my husband's first marriage. He lost his wife to cancer when the boys were 3, 5, and 7. And I married into them when they were, I think, 8, or maybe 7, 9, and 11, probably.
Oh, wow.
And then we have a big gap. So, we have a 13-year-old. And then when I came into the picture, now we have a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and then, like I said, twins who are 16 months. So Kailyn likes to recommend, a twin mom recommended her, and she just kept passing the ball along. So.
Right. I'm beginning to think, this is just a small sampling of the Motherhood Experience guests, but I'm beginning to think that twins are far more common than maybe one might think. Are your twins identical?
They are. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in introducing the ages of your kids and stage of parenting that you're in, I feel like we have a lot to uncover. So
right.
When you, before you met your husband, did you know from like girlhood or when you were a younger woman that motherhood was one of the callings on your life?
I definitely hoped it would be. I definitely had this desire. My grandma had 5 kids, and ever since high school, I'm not sure why, like what really inspired it, but I used to say I was going to have 5 kids like my grandma, and I would have adopted 3 of them. So when I met my husband through Catholic Match and I saw he had the 3 boys, it's like, oh, I might get to one. I was already older. I was already in my 30s. So I thought, well, if I marry him, I might get to 5 kids. And so, yes, I always wanted to have a family, but there was a lot of vocation wrestling in there. So even though I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, I spent a good number of years like really sincerely asking the Lord if he wanted me to be consecrated or thinking he wanted me to be consecrated. And finally I was able to put that question to rest and met Tom, and the rest is history.
So what would your vocation journey have looked like if motherhood wasn't part of your life?
Yeah, so I would have just worked for the Catholic Church as a woman who just said, like, I love Jesus so much and I want everyone to know Jesus. And so I'm just going to dedicate my life to prayer, to working in the church, to bring people to him through retreats, through going out door to door. I've done that before, talk to people in parks. And that's actually, I was single for a lot of my 20s, my early 30s. And that's what it looked like was working for the church and just sort of hoping that the man would come around. So,
Okay, so this is so interesting to me. So you said, was it Catholic Match? Is that what you said?
yep, yep. So that's
So
the
is
Catholic
that like,
online website.
okay,
Yep.
okay. Oh, there's so many questions I have right now. Number one, did you find it odd or intimidating to meet a future potential mate on the internet?
Well,
That
earlier
was
in my yeah, yeah, no, I get it. In my 20s, I had gotten onto Catholic Match very briefly, but I guess I wasn't desperate enough yet. And then in my 30s, I was living in a small town of 2,000 people. Everyone was married. I mean, there was one coworker who had a brother-in-law that maybe, you know, I could go on a date with, but he was never interested. So I really had no options. And so I was ready. I was ready. And it was nice about Catholic matches. I could filter and be like, oh yeah, no, like you don't go to mass enough, or you want one child, like you're not going to fit my life or my desires, and really sort of hone it into people that maybe were more like-minded. And Tom was a widow, or widower, so he said, I don't have time to go to a bar and meet somebody. So that's why he did Catholic match.
so. What year was this when you two met each other
It was
online?
March of 2015.
Okay, this is fascinating to me. So my
Yeah.
husband and I also met online, but it was not through like religious anything.
Okay.
Totally by random chat room chance. Praise God, his hand was in it, because
Wow.
our story is not like that at all. There was no filter. We had no idea what we were getting into, and it was
Oh,
scary. It was 2001 maybe.
oh,
So this
yeah.
was
So
like
it was
when
early. That was.
everyone on the internet was like a serial murderer,
Mhm.
rapist.
Right. Yeah, and here,
Really
I mean,
scary stuff.
I saw pictures of him with his kids. I saw pictures of him with his wife. Like, so I mean, I definitely made sure to meet in a public place, and he's a good guy.
So when you met him then, was it intimidating for you at all, knowing that he had been married, his wife died tragically of terminal
Right.
illness, and
Mhm.
had 3 boys? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think really until pretty close to my marriage, I was naive on on really like the challenge of marrying into a family. So early on when we were dating, I don't recall any sort of being uncertain. I met the kids pretty early on, maybe date
Hmm.
5, and seemed to get along well. Sort of funny. Our first date, he at a certain point he's like, "Well, I think it was about 9:30. He's like, I should be getting home. It's a school night." Right. So that was like my little glimpse. Um, yeah. So I was pretty naive. Towards the end, like about a month before we got married, we went on a big road trip with the kids to visit my mom in northern Idaho. And that was my first glimmer of like how kids can just nag and nag and nag, and there's really no escaping from them. You're like, oh, wow. So, and being the girlfriend was way different than being the wife who was like in the home. And then I felt the responsibility for keeping the house clean. Now I was responsible for meals and getting the kids to school. And so I went from being like the fun aunt to the mom. And that's when it got harder, because then there was more pushback from the kids, and I didn't have any mom. I'd like to say it, I didn't have mom virtues. Right. I mean, usually people get one
Mm.
kid at a time, and they're babies and they're so snuggly and lovey, and then they just grow, and eventually they become 3-year-olds who are defiant and like this. But I got it all at one fell swoop, and I just didn't have patience. I didn't have selflessness. So I've had to learn a lot. Still learning.
How how long do you think it took before you were able to find a groove or a rhythm in melding their lives and yours?
Yeah. 3 years. I don't know. I
Mhm.
mean, definitely the first year was hard. I got pregnant right away, which we had hoped for. So, I had all the pregnancy hormones. I had sleeplessness. So that definitely didn't help. But I can remember being probably 2 years into marriage, 2.5 years into marriage, and just like needing to hold my breath because I was like going to like just bust out at a child. So that just shows like how far along how far in I was still working, and I'm still
Yeah.
working.
Have you ever felt Um, and maybe in particular in the beginning, like, not like you were competing with who their mom was because
Mm.
you couldn't replace her at all, but that there was maybe like this barrier that you wondered if you would ever be able to break through in relationship with those boys?
Yeah, I mean, there's an awareness, like I'm not replacing their mom, right? Like I'm second, I don't know if this is a gift from that comes with the experience, or but like I don't try to compete with her. So Stephanie was a really amazing cake baker, decorator, fancy cakes, things. One time I tried to do like a football cake. It wasn't fancy, but like, I wasn't trying to. I'm not taking baking classes to try to replicate her,
Yeah,
um, and also recognizing like, yeah, in a perfect world, Stephanie would have lived, for their sake. Then I'd be
yeah,
sad because I wouldn't be married to Tom. But as far as kids go, I mean, kids should have their first mother, and like, so I'm just sort of like second best, I guess,
mm,
and and I recognize I could do a lot better. Right? There's a lot
mm,
of help that comes with biology, and there's a lot of help that comes with even if someone adopts a baby who's a baby, just that snuggling and
right,
the oxytocin and all those things, right? Like I'm aware of my weakness and how I can do better. And I just hope like when the boys are older, they look back and say, Heather did the best that she could. And she loved us by like taking care of all of the details of the family. And I hope they say that.
yeah. So, have you and Tom been married for like 7-ish
Yeah, we
years?
got married. I was thinking, I was like, I need to calculate and remember all the details for like these questions. We got married in
Right.
2016. So we're getting close to 8 years.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, your entrance into motherhood was really even, I mean, technically before you got married because you were involved in these boys' lives and you knew at some point, when you became engaged that this is it. You were going to not just become husband and wife, but a family
Right.
with these boys. And so you had to jump in both feet, head first, whatever the expression is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said you also got pregnant right away. I'm trying to wrap my brain around trying to parent three. The oldest was a preteen by that
Yeah.
point.
11. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such a challenging age for boys, I think, especially because they're so active
Mm.
and really trying to find out who they are, where they fit. And then you got pregnant right away and you've got all the hormones and
Mm.
emotions, and you also are trying to figure out what it is to be a wife. And you had so many firsts all piled into one. And I'm trying to reconcile in my head how, like, I probably would have cried in a closet somewhere several times.
There, there were nights where Tom would have already fallen asleep and I'm in bed and I am crying. Right. I mean, for feeling how hard it was, for feeling mad at myself for not having acted patiently,
Mhm.
or just being acting ugly. And then there was a suffering of like, well, my husband doesn't understand the struggle. So there definitely were lonely times. I mean, I sort of joke that when people get married, like there's the disagreements about where to put the milk in the fridge or how to squeeze the toothpaste. And I'm like, Tom and I didn't have time for that. We were busy like trying to be united, like against the children, like a unified front to get for these boys. And so the adjustment to Tom I felt was pretty easy. It was the adjustment to being a full-time mother with really like no space to escape. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to chuckle. There's one memory I have of being in the shower in my master bathroom and someone is just knocking on the door, knocking and trying to say something to me. And I'm like, I can't hear you. I'm in the shower. And I'm like, they are not going to ruin my shower. And so 15 minutes later, I come out like, what was going on? Who was pounding on the door? Oh, it was me. Can I watch TV? No, you did not just pound on the door for 10 minutes to ask me if you can watch TV. So like these are the things like
Oh,
I went from having an apartment by myself to then going straight into a house where there's now four other people besides me making a mess. And it was a lot of work. There's
Yeah.
yeah.
And also, I can imagine the a little bit of a navigation journey of Tom was parenting these boys with Stephanie, you said her name
Mhm,
was?
mhm,
His first wife. They had their own parenting styles by that point. Then Tom has to parent these boys himself alone. And then you just kind of come into that. Like, there's no,
right.
let's figure out how this goes. This is like established running parenting style.
Mm.
What was that like, and was it jarring at all? Were there things that you thought like, "I'm not sure I would parent my children this way?"
Yeah, I think Tom was pretty open for to my input. So like his parents had cleaned the house weekly when Tom was a single dad, and I came in, and so there's always like the advice of when someone's new to, as the leader of an organization, don't change things for a year. Just sort of get welcomed. And I feel like as a new parent coming into an existing family, that advice is very relevant. But these are all things I've learned, like the wisdom from my experience because I did it wrong. I mean, I came in and said,
Mm.
well, like grandma and grandpa aren't going to clean our house anymore. So, like, everybody, we're doing chores and Saturday chores, and kids are crying because they're young. And I had no idea, like, what a 7-year-old's capable of doing. And, now that I have a kid who's almost 7, I'm like, gosh, I can't believe I made the older of the youngest of the older ones do that type of stuff. And so, these were things I just didn't know. But I came in and I did do a lot of changes as far as chores and Tom and I talked a lot about, like, I would never just come in and just do something. I would say, what do you think about this? And I still feel like we operate that way where I might be the one coming up with the idea for like improvement of home behavior, but I'm running it by him to get his take on it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so today you have 7 boys.
7. Yep.
What is that like, are you just running constantly?
Well, we have some land. So we have 20 acres with a big yard that I'm looking out on. And so there's a lot of like, let's just go outside, and I make them look at the flowers with me. I'm cultivating little florists and gardeners here. And but so we have good land for kids to run, and our older boys like to read, and I like to read too, the little boys. But yeah, I
Yeah.
have a friend who has a bumper sticker on her car that says "Mom of Boys, less drama than girls, but harder to keep alive." And I feel that's true. I mean, there's so much wrestling, and
Oh,
like there have been times where we have forbidden like any cartoons that have fighting because we're going to just try to stop them from fighting and wrestling. And I don't know if it works, but
oh my goodness.
yeah.
That's hysterical, and I feel like certainly accurate as well, certainly
Hmm.
accurate. I've got one of each, and so
Okay.
I feel like I can attest to that to some degree.
Yeah.
So what do you homeschool then?
I don't. When I got or before I met Tom, I had this grand vision. I thought I would homeschool until 5th grade, really give kids like solid home values without the influence of naughty peers. And then I would do Catholic middle school to transition them in a sort of safer environment. And then I would do public high school to just introduce them to the world and talk about the issues of the world while they're still at home. So then when I met Tom, and he said, like, we got a good Catholic school the kids are going to. Like, I don't really see the need to like bring them home. And since I was a mom on day one, I was totally fine. Be like, see ya. I'm gonna
Right.
have 8 hours or 7 hours a day to just do my own thing. So that was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Because I was just going to also ask, like, how would you navigate and jump right into that? But okay, so that makes sense.
Yes.
So you are a Catholic.
Yep.
Um, were you and Tom in the same area? Did you end up moving to where he was?
Yeah, we were only 30 minutes away, which is why he decided to write to me.
Okay.
Well, she's pretty close. Like I could try going on a date with her, and so that's why.
Oh
But
my
so
goodness.
after we got married, I moved to his house and sort of his church community, and that's an adjustment too. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah, so
the
you were just starting with everything all at once, brand new,
yeah.
but not. your beginning was like in the middle kind of everyone else's life,
Right.
which yeah, which
Right.
is just fascinating to me, this whole thing. So
Yeah.
you were pregnant 3 times, 4
Yeah.
4 boys. Were the
Yes.
twins a surprise? Were they expected at all?
Well, so this is so funny because, I said I wanted 5 when I was in high school, and Tom knew that when we got married. So we had our 2 boys, the 2 from me,
Right.
and I wasn't ready to give away baby things yet. And, I would tell Tom, I said, "You have 5 baby experiences, and I've had 2." Like, it wasn't enough. And I wanted to try for a 6th. And Tom, he said, "Oh, I'm tired. I'm just so tired." And so I sort of like resigned myself, like it's probably just going to be the 5 kids. And so I was really trying to treasure Blaze as he was growing up. And probably like 9 months after I like had wanted to get pregnant for that 3rd time, Tom says, "Oh, I think I'm open to trying." And I'm like, "Really?" Because I sort of like the stage that we're at now. Like Blaze can
Right.
walk and hold my hand, and he's pretty much potty trained, and I like my body, and I'm getting to the gym. And so I had to sort of wrestle with that for a while. And in the end, it was a couple things. One, I just thought, well, if Tom is ready, I'm just going to take that as like my sign to try. And also, I was thinking of the younger 2, and like when the older boys leave and go off to college, the other 2 would have been something like 11 and 9, and then a good chunk of their childhood would just be 2 kids, 2 siblings. And
Hmm.
I just wanted them to have the big family environment. So we tried. And um, we well, this is actually really hilarious. As you said, I think there's like a lot of different random parts of my story that are maybe odd compared to other people. But so my second pregnancy was a fraternal twin pregnancy, and at the first ultrasound, we found the baby, once baby B like didn't have a heartbeat.
Mm.
But the interesting thing with that that first ultrasound of the second pregnancy, the ultrasound tech, she's just starting the exam. We see multiple bubbles on the screen, and the ultrasound tech says, "What's your last name again?" And I said, "Triplett." And then I said, "Are we having triplets?" And she says, "Well, you're having at least 2, but but it looked like 3 because of how the placentas were wrapped." And so for 5 minutes we were having twins, and
Oh my
then we
goodness.
weren't.
Yeah.
So then for this pregnancy, I was going into the bathroom to get ready for the first ultrasound, and I tell Tom, "Oh, tell the lady our story from last time. Ah, it's so funny." And so he tells her, and so the exam begins, and I say, "Look, Tom, there's only one bubble, like on the screen, one baby." And she says, "Well, there are 2 in there, 2 babies in the one bubble." And so there we were. But I was excited, like having had a twin pregnancy for a very short time, and knowing there's a possibility, like even before we knew we were having twins this last time, I was sort of praying like, "Lord, keep the baby or babies safe."
Hmm.
Like so I was grateful. And they had quite a journey too. They had quite a journey.
Are there twins on either your or Tom's side of the family?
I guess through my dad's link, there's the fraternal option, the fraternal twin option, but I guess every woman has an equal shot of identical twins. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah.
I used to always want twins. I figured 1 pregnancy, 2 kids, like, man, how easy would that be?
Yeah.
And I have identical twins in my family on both sides, but it didn't
Oh wow.
happen for me. And also,
Okay.
I can't say that I'm sad about that because then
Mm.
I was like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
Yeah,
So were your
mm,
twins term? Did they make it to term?
they were not. So they started their in utero life with 1 placenta and 2 amniotic sacs. That's called monodi twins. And there's a medium risk of some complications of nutrient sharing. So they were monitored a lot. I had a 16-week ultrasound, and had a 17-week ultrasound for some other reason. And the babies had flip-flopped like positions in the uterus, which they really shouldn't be able to do if they have their 2 sacs. And so what was discovered is I like to think that they like were wrestling and they broke the division in their sacs and created one big sac. So that's really
What?
risky. Yeah, that's now mono twins. And they had a higher likelihood of death in utero because of cord entanglement and crimping or knotting or strangulation from the cord and things like this. So it was a crazy journey. I found that out at 18 weeks. So that was the case. At 25 weeks, I started driving like 50 minutes every day into Minneapolis to have a non-stress test. And I did it every day for 2 weeks. This
Oh
was
my
the
word.
end of November going into December. And then on December 12th, I moved into the Mother Baby Center in Minneapolis. And the hope was I was going to live there for 7 weeks. And my husband would be home with the kids. So I completely acknowledge like I had the easy thing. I was like having a hospital retreat and my
Right?
husband was
Like
home with the kids.
a little spa,
Exactly.
7 week stay.
Nap
But
when I
what
want, like exercise, watch TV, have people cook my meals. Like there were some perks.
ex- eh, definitely some perks, but were you also like, what's going on at home? I miss my family. I miss my routine. Like, what's happening with this pregnancy? Were there moments of kind of angst for you?
Too much actually. I remember like around on Christmas Day, I'd video chatted with the family like for 2 hours. Thankfully there's all these video programs and stuff.
Right.
But then like for the rest of the day, like my family was busy doing their holiday thing. So there were times where if I didn't really hear from the family much in a day or two, I would miss them. But otherwise, like I'd have the video call up and I'd be talking to my little boys while my husband was trying to do work, or I'd read books through the phone. And I befriended like other women that were living there, like in the unit with me. And I took it like a little ministry. And I ended up living in the hospital for 3 weeks and a day. So they were born. So I see the system worked during one of the monitoring sessions. One baby's heart rate was just tanking during routine contractions. And
Mm,
this was this was on a day where Minnesota had a massive snowstorm.
of course.
And we have a fifth of a mile long driveway that was not cleared. So from the time I was alerted by the nurse that something was up to the time that there was an emergency C-section with me like put under general anesthesia was 56 minutes from like when I was alerted to their birth time. So my husband was not there. I was knocked out.
Oh,
It was wild, but there was just a lot of trust. I don't know. I think it was really just God's help, and so many people were praying for us. And I actually think it was a beautiful experience. And then I got to spend then the babies had 2 months in the hospital out at Children's because they were small. They were 3 pounds, 7 ounces. But they did great. They just had to grow and learn how to nurse. And so again, like if I had brought term babies home, I would have had to compete with the other kids needing me and all these demands.
right.
But when I was
Right.
in the hospital with the babies, I just got to be with them. And that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. My mind is just racing a little bit. So also that whole time then your husband is single parenting again, but more kids this time.
Right. And some bigger kids at least. So the bigger kids I think helped a
Sure.
lot. I'm sure there was a lot of TV watching and grandma and grandpa probably came over and but I
Were there any kind of like moments where he was concerned for your health and maybe like even the fact that you were in the hospital, did that kind of conjure up any worry or concern for him?
I don't think he was really worried about my health, because really I was fine. I mean, unless something happened in the C-section procedure, like I wasn't confined to bed rest or anything.
Mm.
It was just there so the babies could be monitored 3 times a day. But yeah, there was definitely a risk for the babies. I mean, if one died because of the shared placenta, the other one could die within 15 minutes.
Ugh.
We didn't, after the initial, like when we first got the news, there were tears. But then I just started reaching out to people for prayer, and we had a family trip planned to Hawaii right after that. So that was great. We just got away from our environment. You could just enjoy paradise. And I think that helped with the a simulation of the news. And yeah, for whatever reason, Grace, I'm assuming by the time we got to the hospital, like I
Mm,
really wasn't worried for the babies.
mm.
So
So by the time you made it home then, and you've got s- 7 boys,
yeah,
2 infants at the same
yes,
time,
yes,
and changing diapers on babies is an experience in itself,
yes.
but changing diapers on boys and 2 at a time, I imagine there were some mishaps.
At home, I don't think there were too many, but I mean, it's so funny, like in the hospital, because they give them like a supplement in the milk, which causes very loose,
Yeah.
explosive stool. So there's always these jokes with the nurses of like, did the babies pee on you today? And, oh, and they totally like exploded into their incubator isolate thing.
Yeah.
And, we had to change it. So that was always funny. Like, no, no baby got you today, nurse? Like, bummer. But
Yeah,
yeah, it
so
was wild.
the NICU experience is
Yeah.
it's a life all its own as well, and so you had twins in the NICU for 2
Twins.
months, you said?
Yeah, so they had 8 days in the actual NICU unit, and then they moved to the infant care center. But yeah, it's all
Okay.
the sort of preemie world, and it really gave me a great appreciation for nurses. For example, I mean,
Mm.
just all the things that nurses do. I think I find I'm not really a naturally empathetic person, so when I live through an experience, it helps me to be more empathetic. And so like there's a bond with someone, like, oh, I see twins, like how early were your babies and where did they stay and
Yeah,
things like that.
great conversation starter.
Right. And walking through, anywhere with a stroller with 2 babies, like people will naturally just stop and ask. And yeah, there's really a camaraderie, like a kinship, like, oh, tell me about your twins. And
Yeah.
um,
Oh, wow. So they're coming up on a year and a half
mhm.
now, and so what has your life kind of leveled out to be like? You've got a blended family now from 18 years to not even 18 months yet. What does a day in the life of Heather look like?
Yeah, so I just recently have started getting up at 5:30 to just have a little bit of time that's my own before there's a need, pushed on me. So one day it'll be the gym, the next day I'll be praying on the couch, and sort of like a flip flop like that, at least Monday through Friday. And I've never been a person who would get up early, but it was just an inspiration one night, and I just followed it, and it was so good.
Mm,
So there's that, and then the kids are usually up, and my husband does a lot, like in the morning, because when I was used to be feeding the babies in the night, like he just was the guy in charge of getting the other kids up for school, and so he still keeps that mostly going. Kids are getting off to school at 7, maybe 7:45, depending on the day, and then playing with the babies, and sometimes our 4-year-old, if he's not in preschool, playing with them for till about 9. Then there's a nap from 9 to 11. And especially if I have my preschoolers in school, then that's my time to get stuff done, answer emails and
yeah.
the projects, because the to-do list never gets done. If I can get one thing on the to-do list done in a day, like victory. um,
And are you a list maker? Does it feel better when you
yeah,
can cross things off a
yeah,
list?
because there's just so much to do, all these
Mm,
details, and so I just have to put it in a list. And not even for the point of checking it off, but just so I don't forget it. Like if I have
right.
any idle time and I'm thinking, what should I do right now? But if I have my list, I can look and say, oh, okay, let me work on some of these things. And then the kids are home. The big boys and the 6-year-old start to arrive home around 3:30. And I like to cook, so making dinner. And that's what's nice about having the big age gap, is we sort of have built-in helpers. So they're not
Yes.
all needy. So I can, like right now, my husband was mowing the lawn, and so the big boys were watching the other kids. Kids are down by 8, hopefully the little boys, and the big kids, maybe we'll play a game, maybe we won't. And then now that I'm getting up early, I try to get to bed by 9:30. Doesn't always
Yeah.
happen.
So what is the family dynamic like between the brothers?
Oh yeah.
Do they only know each other as brothers? Is there
Yeah,
like
they're great. They're great. Like they all relate to each other as brothers. And our little boys will relate to their older brothers' cousins, who are not like from their mom. You know, they're not blood cousins of our little boys, but we still say that's your aunt and your uncle, and those are your cousins, and they relate to them that way. And the little boys, you know, they're aware that like, oh, we're not blood cousins, but they're still their cousin.
Yeah.
And the older boy, yeah, I mean, there's definitely the bickering of siblings in our family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So are you of the personality type where, you said that you were a list maker, where if the only thing you successfully do in a day is keep everybody fed and alive,
mm,
is that enough for you, or do you wrestle with or struggle with, like, I'm kind of failing at life here because I didn't get anything
mm.
done?
Yeah, I definitely don't think I would say I was failing at life. Um, so like my husband, when he was the stay-at-home dad, he too was a guy who likes to get things done, you know, and
Mm,
he would struggle. And I'd be like, Tom, like that's that's just how it is, right? Like when you're watching the kids, there's really like you're not getting things done except watching the kids. And
yeah.
and so like I guess I consider myself lucky if I got to cross some things off the list, and the list will weigh on me, just because there are permission slips, and the senior photo has to be submitted, and I know all these things that have to
Mm,
get done. So that might mean like on a weekend or an evening, or my husband was giving me like Wednesday afternoon for a couple hours where he would be home with the kids and I could just try to get stuff done. So I guess I let him know when I say the list is too long and I just got to get some stuff done, and then he'll step
mm.
in and give me, the time I need.
Do you feel like stepping into motherhood right away with boys who were older,
Hmm.
that now that you have these four younger ones, when they come up to that age, do you feel like it will be more familiar territory there, since you kind of already stepped into that previously?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I will handle, say, rebellion better. I hope
Ah,
so. And I also think it will be different, right? So there can be a lot of guilt of being a non-biological mom, as and saying like, am I loving them differently? And I've taken a lot of solace from women who have adopted other children and said, Heather, you're not going to love your biological and your non-biological the same. Like, we still have to love them, but it's not going to look the same.
yeah,
So there's solace, but there's still guilt, right?
sure.
So will I parent the younger four better when they're disgruntled teens? I don't know. I mean, I hope I'm parenting every kid better as I learn from
Right.
the first kid. We'll see.
Right. I appreciate the transparency in that. And it makes me kind of walk down this path of a question for you, in that raising seven boys with your faith and with the crazy world that we are in now, and you mentioned rebellion, how do you navigate as a parent of young men who will one day be the heads of their own homes? How do you kind of navigate the worldliness and protecting them while also, educating them and equipping them for that day of their own?
Yeah, the worldliness. I mean, we do swim against the tide a lot in our house. So we've been very limited in screen time. Like our boys were getting 30 minutes a day of screen time, which is nothing when you're a high school student. I
Right.
mean, they say my friends are gaming until midnight. And we're like, well, your device is turning off at 9:30. Like, so maybe in a way, it's easier, as the second parent, to just be like, well, I'm sorry, like this is what's right for you. Because there's not so much like, oh, I feel so bad for you. It's like, well, I do feel bad for you, but we have to do what's right. And
Yeah.
and I'm also like a pretty principled, sort of stubborn person, so that probably makes it easier to react that way. So yeah, we swim against the tide a lot, and then we do tell our boys, as far as just like being equipped to go out and be the heads of their home, like you will leave our house knowing how to do laundry, how to clean. They're watching younger siblings. Like you will have responsibilities because it's good for you to have responsibilities and learn these things. And I had a a mom that I looked up to, I do look up to. And when I was single and I'd watch her kids doing chores, or maybe it was once I first had the boys, when I was wrestling myself with the chores, she said, Heather, I could do the chores better than them and faster than them, but it's good for them to do it. And especially as we have our 6-year-old who's going to be 7. And when the senior goes off to college, the 7-year-old will move into sort of the chore rotation. And that will mean holding Colby's hand to do the chores with him. Will it be
Mm,
painful to teach him? Yes. Will it be long and slow and tedious to teach him? Yes. But that's how we have to teach him. And that's something I have learned, having not learned that with the older boys. I
yeah.
was just said, here, just go do it. I didn't know that I had to teach them. And
Yeah.
so that's one area where I hope I will do better with the younger crew.
Yeah. So how, if you could put into, a couple of words or a sentence reflecting on your life as a mom and how it certainly didn't start maybe how you would have ever anticipated, but what would you say motherhood is or has been for you these last almost 8 years now?
Hmm. That's a good question. I got some things that come in my mind, but I want to make sure I don't just think as I speak. Well, the first thing that came to my mind will sound like a negative, but motherhood is a gift of self, and children have a way of sucking the selflessness out of a person if they're trying to parent well. And so for that, it's sanctifying, and there's so much joy. There's a quote from Dorothy Day, and I wish I had it handy. I'd read it to you. It's so good. But she's talking about toddlers, and it's roses and thorns. It's their perversities of their temper tantrums, and yet the sweetness.
Mm,
So it's the hardest job, I think, being a parent, and yet there's so much reward, right? I mean, I just snuggle my babies and I hold the hands of my little kids, and I talk philosophy with my high schooler who's going to a school that teaches philosophy, and I'm like, yes, this is so great to hear these words coming out of your mouth.
I I love that answer so much, and I think it's so authentic to every stage of motherhood, right? Like you've got the whole gamut of the age ranges before you, and you touch on each of those so beautifully. And I say that parenting is the hardest calling, but it's also the highest calling. And so of course it is going to be hard because the reward and the risk are so important and exponential in that journey.
Mhm.
But I gotta ask you this. You mentioned that you like to cook, which is great
Sure.
because how do you keep 7 growing boys fed? Like
Oh, yes.
what is the skill level there for not going broke and not having total chaos?
Yeah, a lot of crock pot meals, and when I see a recipe, I mean, I'm normally automatically doubling it. It depends on how many it feeds. Sometimes I'm tripling it. So there's that. We also started limiting the kids, especially the older boys. If you've had seconds and you're still hungry, you can have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You're not going to keep eating our leftovers that dad and
Oh,
I want to
wow.
eat for lunch, for example. Um, we're out in the country, so we have chickens, which are giving us lots of eggs, and our neighbor across the street will hook us up. We pay him, of course, but for half of a pig or a whole pig and a half of a steer or cow or whatever. That's actually happening right
Yeah.
now. My husband's going to process the cow on Thursday, and so we've got 2 chest freezers and 2 refrigerator freezers. I mean, it's crazy.
I can imagine even my 10-year-old son today, like every 10 minutes, can I eat this? Can I eat this? And I'm like, can you drink some water? Because
Yeah.
it is it is early in the month right now, and our grocery budget is already it's done. It's
Mm,
already done for the month. You got to slow your
right.
roll.
Right. And there's a lot of even with their little boys, I'm hungry. I'm like, well, snack is at 3. You can wait.
Yeah.
And so there's am I strict? I think so. I don't allow just random snacking. I created a list. If you're a teenager and you're hungry, and it's not close to mealtime, here's what you can have. It's not junk food, and it's not something that's going to make a dish. Like, it's going to be
Mhm.
something easy. It's not messy. And so those are things I've
That is something that I think really resonates with me. Sounds very similar to something that I've done. I have it tacked to the side of the fridge. This is morning snack time, and these are what you're allowed to eat. This is afternoon snack time, but my son is asking me. Morning snack time starts at like 10 a.m. or so. It's 10
oh,
to
same here.
10:30,
Yep.
I
Hmm.
think. And so then I have the list of foods, and so he'll ask me at 8:45, "At snack time today, could I have?" And I'm like, "K no, we're not having this conversation. If it's not
Right.
on the list, you're not having it."
Yeah, I finally got, so like the afternoon snack, everyone was asking about that when I got married. Like, they'd come from school, what's for snack? And so I just created a list based on the day on the calendar. So they just like look at the day and see what the snack is. And then there's
Oh,
this
that's a
teenage
really good
snack list.
idea.
Yeah. That way I got tired of being asked. There are so many questions. And if every kid asks me what's for snack, I will have been asked that 5 times. And that's exhausting.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
it's exhausting after one time. It's probably, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, probably my least favorite question any child, my own or anyone else's, could
What's for
ask
snack?
me. Don't ask Val what what when you can eat or what you can eat at that time. Like, just don't
Yes.
do it.
Right, or I say you can't ask about what's for dessert when we're still having dinner. Like, just
Ah, and do your kids expect dessert every day?
they used to, but even my husband, who used to be more into sweets than me, like, he said, "Oh, I think we just gotta cut some of them out." And so now I do get asked, "Are we having dessert?" Because, like, our little
Mm,
boys, they eat pretty well, but there's certain things they're not keen on, and if there's dessert, they will, like, eat the thing they don't wanna eat. But if there's no dessert, then they just will opt not to eat it, and, we're like, "That's fine. You can be
yeah.
hungry if you don't wanna eat the beans or whatever, but, are we having dessert? You can't ask me that right now."
So I want to ask you one more question as we wrap up here. And so I know that you're friends with Kailyn, and she has her own brood of kids, and here you've got 7 boys. And how do you find community and friendships, and just how do you even navigate spending time with other families? Because when you come, it's 9 people all at one time. So how does that work for you? And do you struggle in maintaining relationships or community?
Yeah, good question. I feel like in the winter,
Mm.
it is harder to find people. I mean, I don't, I don't live in a neighborhood. I can see houses from, so I don't just walk down and see people on the sidewalk. So that's hard. But we have great friends. So being out here in a rural setting and being Catholic, like, people tend to have a good amount of kids. Like, we have friends that have 9 kids, and they host in the summer every Friday night. They call it Deep Fry Friday. They fry up a bunch of processed foods, and
Yeah.
we just sit on their driveway, and it's a bunch of Catholic families, and the kids all run around and the parents talk. So it's like my social life really kicks into gear in the summer. and
Yeah, I
and
love that.
yeah, and families will have play dates, or like, like Fridays, the mass is at like a kid friendly time, 9:30 or something, and then the moms, like, we get together at a park with the kids and have donuts, like. But in the winter it is a challenge, and yeah, there's a lot of trying to do like a mom's group, and being willing to haul the kids to get there, and it's not the social life I had when I was single.
Yeah,
That's so.
yeah, very different. And do you ever feel, even though it's your family, do you ever feel kind of like as an outsider in your own home because you are the only woman?
Oh, hmm. Well, this is so funny. When I was pregnant with my first, I wanted a girl because I no, I didn't. No, I wanted a boy. That's right. I wanted a boy because I was thinking of like teenage boy hormones. And we would do a Friday movie night, and we would take turns picking. So, my husband would pick. I think it was just the boys at the time. The older boys were picking. Well, it's probably like the third week in the row when it was going to be a Marvel movie or a superhero movie, and I just thought in that moment, oh, maybe I could get pregnant. Maybe I'm having a girl. Like, that would be really nice. So when it comes to sort of entertainment options, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, barf. Like, I don't want to watch another Marvel. But with the little kids, I can still watch Little Mermaid and the things like that. Um, and then Tom gets to do like a good number of like father son events.
Mm.
And I think, oh, like there'll be no mother daughter events for me. And everyone says, well, you'll have your daughter in laws. We'll see. So I hear that could be a whole different thing too. So
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a mother-in-law. So I can't speak to that. And I know, like, I only know what it's like to be a daughter and a daughter-in-law, and I'm probably not great at either. my my dad used to say that trying to hug me growing up was like trying to hug a porcupine because I was just very independent. That would be so
mm,
interesting because
the,
I'm going to have, a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law potentially when my children get married. And so those will both be different
right, right,
from one another. And
yeah.
you'll have potentially 7 daughters-in-law.
It could be. I hope the Lord takes some of them as priests, but but
There you go.
with a big
There you
family,
go.
He can take a lot of them, and I still could have grandkids. But yeah, I will
Yeah.
say, like I am a boy mom in a way. Like even before I got married, a friend of mine who knew me, she said, Heather, I hope you have girls because you are such a boy mom, and it will be good for you to experience girls. And so at least I have that, right? Like I'm into camping, I'm into hiking, I like to be outside.
Hmm.
So to have all boys, I'm out there with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You watch. Let's say however many years from now, you come back, tell me how many granddaughters you have
All right.
and what kind of experience that is. How about that?
Yes, and that's probably the best type, right? Because I don't have to deal with like teenage attitude. Be like, oh, go home to your parents. I'll just
Yeah.
come and spoil you and try to give you some words of wisdom. And
Yeah. Well, Heather, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for trusting me and sharing your motherhood story and being a guest on the Motherhood Experience.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.